Okay, in this video, I'll go over multiplying matrices. I've got some of the steps labeled down here. And it's important to remember when you're multiplying matrices, you're going to take the first matrix and multiply it by the second matrix. The first thing we want to do is do a dimensions analysis. And so we take the row times the column. Of the first one, we get 2 times 3. There's 2 rows and 3 columns, so 2 times 3. Row times the column. Now, if we look at our second matrix, I have 3 rows, and then I have 2 columns. So 3 times 2, row times the column. That'll give me 6 elements in the matrix. 3 times 2 is 6. And then there's 3 rows and 2 columns. So that's a dimension analysis. Now it's important to remember we'll always take the row of the first matrix and we'll times it by the column of the second matrix, and that's where we get the 2 by 2. Now let's test to see if we can actually multiply this together. If we look at the dimensions of the 2 matrices, where I have a 2 by 3 and a 3 by 2, you can look at the 2 inside numbers, and if those are the same, yes, you can multiply them together. If they are not the same, you can't not multiply them together. So you're done with the problem and you just simply write, no, I can't do it. And usually the reason is that they're undefined. So remember the reason. I don't have it down there, but remember it's undefined. So if they're the same, you can do it. If they're not the same numbers on the inside only, it's a no. So remember that. Check your dimensions. Look at the inside to see if you can. And now we're going to talk about the ants outside of your numbers. Okay, so if you look at the row in the column, R times C, the first and the second one, if you look at the outside numbers, so if I look at the 2 on the outside of the first matrix and the 2 on the outside of the second matrix, that tells me the dimensions. You see the 2 times 2 is the row, right? 2 is a row, 2 is a column. 2 times 2, 2 times 2 right there, will give us a 4. So there'll be 4 numbers in our final answer. There'll be 2 rows and 2 columns, looking at those last 2 numbers. So that's the idea. You want to check your dimensions. The 2 inside numbers tell you if you can do it. The 2 outside numbers tell us what size of matrix we're going to end up with. Okay, in the first part of this video, we talked about the dimensions of a matrix. C is found by taking the row times the column. So we see this has 2 rows and 3 columns, so it's a 2 by 3. There's 6 numbers in the matrix C. We can see in the second matrix C, it's 3 rows, 2 columns, so there's also 6. And we also talked about the 2 inside numbers tell us if we can do the matrix C. If they're the same, we can. If they're not the same, we can't. And we stop and we call them undefined. Now, if we want to check to see what type of matrix we're going to end up with, is we look at the 2 outside numbers. So there's the outside row, there's the outside column. So 2 times 2 will give us a 2 by 2 matrix. So that means we're going to have 4 numbers in our answer. So what I've done is I've gone ahead and set up my my matrix here, row 1 times column 1, row 1 times column 2, row 2 times column 1, row 2 times column 2. So this is the idea. You're going to take the first row of the first matrix times by the first column of the second matrix. So this is what these indexes are for. So if you'll go ahead and set this out, set this up like I have right here, it'll tell you exactly what you need to do. So this is important. You test to see if you can do it. If you can, you look at the 2 outside numbers. It'll tell your dimension. Go ahead and set your dimensions up right here. You're going to have 4 numbers. Set those 4 numbers up, and then you're pretty much guaranteed to get the right answer. So this is how it works. We take the row of the first one, which is a -3, 6, and 3. This is the first, second, third number. We times it by the first column in the second matrix because row 1 goes with column 1. There's the first, second, third element. First, second, third element. And then we times these numbers together. You don't add these columns, you times them together. This is not a negative 363. It is negative 3, 6, and 3. Okay, so here we're gonna go ahead and multiply these together. So let's see what my first number is. Negative 3 times 9. Negative 3 times 3 is a negative 9. 6 times a negative 6 is a negative 36. 3 times a negative 12, or negative 4 is a negative 12. And then what's really strange about this is we're going to add those numbers together. And if I add all those numbers together, I get a negative 57. So that's the first element. It's row 1, column 1, right? So that's that first number is a negative 57. Now let's do my second row, or my first row, column 2. First row, column 2. So negative 3 times a negative 1 gives me a positive 3. 6 times 4 gives me 24. And then 3 times 6 gives me 18. So 27 plus 18, that will be a 45. So my first row, the second element of my first row, right? First row, second element, column 2, that'd be 45. 2 by 2, I should have 1, 2, 3, 4 numbers. Four numbers. So now I'm going to find my second row, first column. So I take my second row. You see where I put my second row in here? 4, negative 3, 2. 4, negative 3, 2. Now I'm going to take my first column from this second matrix. I'm going to lay it down. First element goes to first element. Second element goes to second element. Third element goes to the third number. So 4 times 3, it gives me a 12. Then I get an 18. So 12, 18, and then I get a negative 8. And when I add all those numbers up, those three numbers, I get a 22. So row 2, column 1 is 22. Now we'll go ahead and do row 2, column 2. The row stays the same. I take the second column. Like here, I use the second column. Take the second column, lay it down. First number, second number, third number in the column, right? Times it to the first row. 4 times a negative 1 is a negative 4. Negative 12. And a positive 12. I add all those three numbers together, and I get a negative 4. So that is the correct answer for this multiplying these two matrices together. So kind of a quick recap. Row times column gives us the dimension of the matrix. The two inside numbers tells us if we can do it. If we can do it, we take the two outside numbers, multiply them together. It tells us the dimensions. The dimensions tells us how many rows and columns we're going to have. So I'm going to have 2 rows, 2 columns. So that means I'm going to have 4 numbers. Row 1 times column 1, row 1 times column 2, row 2 times column 1, and row 2 times column 2. So that's what it is to multiply matrices. So if you have any questions, come over. We'll sit down and do a couple of problems together, and you'll have this all squared away, and you should be good to go. And thank